Hi, this is Corey Miller. Should people become Christians? And if the Romans want to rape women, then it's now good because they're the moral legislators? Are you atheist, Christian, Buddhist, dog, a cat? Were what the Nazis doing objectively evil? What is the gospel of Christianity? Do you know? Do you have an identity? But now you're back to moral relativism. What do you think? Go.
I believe Christianity to be a neutral. I don't think it's good or bad. It depends on how it's used. There are good and bad Christians, good and bad Muslims. There's good and bad atheists out there.
Some people think that Christianity is bad for the world because it's not concerned with knowledge. It's concerned just with faith. But as I look around at the universities in the country, the founding universities, do you know who founded the universities in America?
Christians, I believe.
Yeah, Harvard University, 1636. It was found for truth, for Christ, and the church. Do you know how long that lasted at Harvard?
I don't know off the top of my head.
It was 300 years. And virtually every university in the country for the first 200 years, the university president was also a member of the clergy. So insofar as we think education might be good and the university is at the apex of education, Christianity seems to be somewhat responsible for that, no?
It seems like it.
But the facts are that the universities started in Christian medieval Europe and then came to America, and they didn't get started in Southeast Asia until about 150 years ago. And all of those in South Korea and in India were Christian. What do we think about hospitals? Are hospitals a good thing?
Yeah.
Can you name off the top of your head any names of American hospitals?
St. Francis.
Does that sound like a religious origin?
Particularly, it's a Catholic institution.
There is IU Health Methodist Hospital. Does that sound like a religious origination also?
Yeah, it does.
You have Baptist hospitals, Methodist hospitals, Presbyterian, St. Elizabeth, where I'm at, up in West Lafayette, St. Luke, St. Mark. Most of the hospitals seem to have Christian names on them. Does that have any connection, do you think, then to the goodness of Christianity for the world?
It could, and it also could be, again, most of the population is Christian, so does it show to Christianity's goodness? I don't know about that itself because it depends on how an individual would define Christianity.
So the first hospital could have been started in a land of Hindus, of Muslims, of atheists. Do you know where it was started?
I don't know if we would possibly know that, but I'm curious, so I'll humor the question.
It was founded in the 4th century by Basil the Great, who was a Christian theologian and bishop. He had the vision and started and founded the first hospital, and that in part is why so many of the hospitals today are at least motivated by Christians, ergo the names.
Getting a bunch of people together in for a community, and I think the community is what does a lot of those positive aspects. And I think that's somewhat where a non-religious community is somewhat lacking. It's kind of hard to, I'll use atheists for example. It's kind of hard for a bunch of atheists to go to a church and have a community around a lack of belief in something.
I think it depends on how we're looking at Christianity, depending on if we're looking at it as an individual case or as a general historical case. Could be good or bad.
Look what these Christians did in the name of God. They murdered someone, or they raped someone, or they did something crazy that many people in society would say that's wrong. But a lot of those things, maybe the Salem witch trials or the Crusades, those are often brought up. A lot of those things would be looked at as the illogical outworking of the teachings of Jesus, not logically connected to Jesus' teachings. So we take a view like, say, the Golden Rule. Do you know what the Golden Rule is? What do you think the Golden Rule is?
Do unto others as you would like to do unto you.
That's right. Do you know that Jesus, when compared to Muhammad, Confucius, Buddha, Hillel, is the only one who teaches the positive formulation of the Golden Rule that's universally applicable to all people?
I mean, yeah, the Golden Rule is more of a social, not norm, but like an expectation made by many people.
Why do you think it is that, statistically speaking, conservative Christians are twice as likely to adopt than any other group in the general population in America?
I think they generally have more resources to be able to do that. Like if you have more resources, you can be more compassionate, I think.
There are atheists in leadership, Muslims in leadership, Hindus in leadership, Christians in leadership of universities and hospitals. But the large modern universities in the world were started by Christians. They were founded by Christians. The hospitals as well. You have this sense that rationality and morality are deeply connected to the Christian worldview, a worldview that starts with mind, not matter, and a worldview that starts with a character that is good rather than just some supreme being that's neutral.
Personally think that Christianity is good for the world because it provides a community and a structure for us to uphold our morals, and without that community I think it's really easy to falter into what society tells us is good or bad. So we have that group around us to bring us back to what God says is good and what the Bible says is good.
Usually people want to pit faith against reason.
Right.
And you're a Christian, but you're also a university student.
Right.
You think a Christian can be a thinker?
For sure, yeah. If you're a Christian, that doesn't mean that you just go by the rule book. I mean, you have to think about what you believe and why you believe it.
Why do you believe it?
I believe it because He first loved us, and that way of life is just what I've chosen to follow.
Why not Mormon? Why not Muslim?
That's a good question. I guess that's a good thing to think about.
Christianity can't be inherently good or bad. It's how people interpret them, and those people are then good or bad depending on how they act.
Slavery was something that happened throughout the entire world and still happens today. But it was stopped by Christians in England and in America. In the history of the world, we were the only peoples that ever shed massive blood for that to stop.
We only shed massive blood for that because the South refused to give up the slaves.
No, William Wilberforce in England helped to make it illegal, and then the entire British Navy was commissioned to go after pirate ships which were transporting slaves that were captured and sold by Africans in Africa. And so they put the stop to the Atlantic slave trade. And the Christians in America, you had bad Christian interpretation, you're right. But I would say that's the illogical outworking. In the jungle, there's nothing wrong with having a slave, is there?
Again, not nominally.
I think it can be good or bad, just in the sense that Christianity itself is good, but there are bad people who get into power in Christianity. It's good because, I mean, 10 Commandments, a lot of our laws and stuff are based on the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, listen to your parents, that sort of stuff.
And when you say that Christianity can be bad for the world, in what sense? You said bad actors?
People who get into positions of power in the church who aren't necessarily thinking of the church. They're thinking about greed, they're thinking about the power that might come with it, or anything negative that can be associated with it.
Do you think it's better for civilization than other worldviews, or are you agnostic on that?
I mean, I haven't really thought about that. I mean, everything's kind of got its own different distinction in it.
I think true Christianity is good for the world. I grew up in the church, right? Okay. So I grew up around Christianity. I grew up around different denominations, right? But I feel like the Christianity that is being portrayed today isn't necessarily true Christianity. I think true Christianity is showing who Jesus was and who Jesus is. And Jesus didn't care what you believed, he still loved you. Well, I think it doesn't mean that I have to condone or necessarily agree with everything that you do. I can still love you as a person, and I can still love who you are. And so I think that kind of Christianity is good for the world.
Is Christianity good or bad for the world? As an ordained Christian minister of the gospel and an English professor, the answer to that is